Hi everybody. I want to welcome everyone today to the Jenkins and Continuous Delivery Seminar. Appreciate you all braving the snow, those that live south of the Mass Pike, those like me that had to drive up here in the snow. I don't know. Half of you guys probably had it, half of you guys didn't, but it was a challenge getting here this morning. But thank you all for coming. We have our agenda up here for today, so we're going to be kicking it off. I'm just going to quickly introduce Richard Duncan, our CTO of Black Diamond. He'll take you through 15 minutes of introduction, and we'll follow that up with the rest of the agenda. If anyone has any questions, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of this. So welcome everybody, thanks for your time, and without further delay, Rich Duncan, CTO of Black Diamond.
Wow, applause, I like that. Well, good morning, everybody. It is truly a pleasure to be here. It's truly a pleasure to see so many people that are interested in this topic, because clearly we are. We do a lot of this work. We've got some excellent information to give you guys today, and in your journey towards understanding these tools, understanding CI, CD, understanding DevOps. And really my goal here today, other than to sort of introduce the topic, is to help you guys sort through this stuff and make sure that you walk out of here with the information you need for whatever your next steps are, okay? We have a great lineup for you today of people who are really involved in this stuff at the really technical level, that know the details really well. I'm just the warm-up act. So I am the CTO of Black Diamond Software. I have been working in this area as a service provider, working with these tools for quite some time. We have been doing work in ALM tools and process for a long, long time. I think most of these folks you may know. Andrew Phillips has been intimately involved in Zebia Labs' excellent deploy capability. KK is the original author of Hudson, and now is the CTO recently of CloudBees, and is always involved in the forefront of what's going on with Jenkins and Jenkins Enterprise. And Sunil is somebody who's been using this stuff, so really he's representing you guys out here to sort of share with you his experiences as his organization has attempted to implement CI/CD with the tools that we're representing here. So a little bit about who we are. We've been around for 20-something years. We have been in this space for most of that time. We have done work in process delivery. We have done work in proprietary tools from various vendors. About 6 or 7 years ago, we started to see a trend where people were moving from tools that were proprietary in nature to open source. And as our clients started to shift, we started to shift and take up those responsibilities as well. And nowadays, that this work in the open source movement in application lifecycle management, CI/CD, and DevOps is really about 80% or better of what we do on a day-to-day basis with our team of consultants and solution architects. Some of the companies that we partner with, you can see over there some of the companies that we've done work with, also the obligatory slide. Before we go on to our next topic here, just for us and for me to kind of understand who you all are, how many people are involved in doing continuous integration work with Jenkins now? Wow, okay, so a lot of people with Jenkins. How many people are involved in some level of continuous delivery DevOps initiative now? Okay, so a lot of people here. How about, I'm trying to feedback so you don't have to look around and get next train. How many people are looking to do DevOps, say, in the next 6 to 12 months? If you're not doing it now, okay, good. Okay, so everybody understands this slide, continuous integration, right? We're going to put code in every time the code gets committed. We're going to strive to make sure that we run the tests. We know that we've got a good build. We're going to put it someplace and eventually do more thorough integration testing on it, and then we're going to put it out to some server someplace where it can be picked up and deployed. Sounds simple to do, but as you look at this sort of idea of the different disciplines that are involved in are really just preliminary disciplines here, just technical targeted disciplines. You can start to see where your organization falls in on this sort of stuff. Are you automating your tests? Are they really semi-automated? Do you run your Jenkins build with skip tests on and all that kind of stuff, because you really can't run your tests because they don't work really? Where are you with CI? where are you with your SCM? Are commits bundled to work that you're doing, or are they just haphazard? You know, how all that stuff is. And as you start moving into the realm where you need to be to really sort of leverage CI and CD, it's not just skill acquisition, it's not just tool acquisition, it's also something about how does your organization work? You know, are these people in your project team, are they all unified as a group of people, or are they all siloed? They report to different managers, it's all matrixed in, and no one really talks to anybody, and there's just a lot of infighting about this stuff. So, you know, there's human interests here in addition to skills that have to be acquired, in addition to tools that have to be acquired. All three of those have to go. I won't spend too much more time on that because I'll be stealing Andrew's talk if I do. So, but suffice it to say that, you know, the idea here is that everybody's talking. Your customers have intimate interaction with the business owners and the product owners in your organization, who have good feedback with the development and test groups in your organization. And now what we're really trying to do, the sort of the last leg of all this, is to get the operations people to put in together so that we're not a silo. So this is a slide that's been around for a while. It's really kind of understanding the idea that as you go from dev into operations, that there needs to be a connection. And this is more than just a tool connection. It's an information passing. It's sharing of responsibility. In fact, the next thing we'll be talking about is it's even sharing of budget. Because if you don't have the bridges that go between here, if you act as silos, you'll have all the tools in place. You'll have something that looks like DevOps, but it won't really be, because you've basically got two distinct groups of people who are not really sharing responsibility. They're not really sharing information, and it's still two silos. And it will suffer from being in two silos. In fact, one of our guys who's probably got the most experience with some of these sort of issues is working in an organization where they've got all the right things in place and they say all the right things, but what we know is that there's no planning between the two. They don't work together, and they're constantly infighting with each other. Again, it's an organizational issue as much as it's tools and its process. So if we look at the way that we create and run systems, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get these two groups to share information and move together. So that when people say in an agile, lean sense that what we're going to produce every release is potentially shippable code, we're not just saying that potentially because we've never really tried it, but we've actually put it out on an infrastructure. We can do that reliably on a regular basis so that we know it really was potentially shippable because we actually installed it someplace. And you have to be able to do that a lot to be able to fulfill those true tenets of what agile and lean mean. But if you don't have an organization that can do that, you're hamstrung. So that's gotten us involved in things like SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, as one of the many things that we will work with a client on in terms of trying to understand how the rest of a business works and how development has to work underneath it to support what the business needs, which sometimes looks kind of waterfall-y, but also can have, you know, a rich part of what Agile is in terms of iterative development, you know, refining and retrospectively looking at what you're doing and trying to improve it, and trying to get things to market quicker. And again, please don't feel like you have to read all these. We're going to actually take the presentation, put it up on a PDF, and get it out on our website if you're interested in all this. But basically, you know, last slide here, the speed to which software is conceived, created, and tested is increasing, and that's what we want. That takes the excellent tools that we have here. It takes people like you that are interested and can be leaders of this sort of effort in your organization. It also takes, you know, the ability to help transform the organization that you have. Okay? So without further ado, we're going to continue on here. Andrew's going to come up a little bit and talk about some of the experiences in this exact area with Deploy It in ZB Labs, followed by Kasuke, who's going to talk a little bit more about some neat stuff in Elastic Builds and Jenkins. And finally, Sunil's going to come up and tell you a little bit about personal experiences. We're going to have a question and answer session later on. If you're interested in sort of the open source tooling versus some of the stuff that we have here and the differences between open source and enterprise, Nelson Jordan, would you please raise your hand? Nelson's from Black Diamond. He would be a great guy to talk to about that. If you're interested in the process side, how do I you know, do a better job at, you know, being agile and lean in my organization, which has a lot of waterfall things that it does. Gary Hathaway, would you raise your hand, please? and is William back there someplace? Those are two guys in our organization that deal a lot with that. We'd be happy to help you, and we're looking forward to a rich discussion and interchange later on today about those ideas, and hopefully to kind of move you guys forward. So without any further ado, Andrew, the podium is yours.
Here.
There he is. Come on up.
You have a remote? No remote?
Yeah, get that. Switch this around.
Okay. Oh, wow. Is it on? No.
This is just ready to record.
Oh, okay. It's just,
We have a remote mic.
no, that's all right. That's all right. I can do the standing at the podium thing. All right. Let's have a look. See how we make this thing work. We do not want to save that. We do not want to look at that. Oh, welcome to it. Oh, we're doing it like that. Single presentations. It'll load, maybe. Oh, it did. It's already open? No? Window? It's supposed to. Oh, it may be on the other screen. There we go. Oh, no, you're halfway through the giving away the punchline. No, that's not where we want to be. It's way in the middle. If you saw all of that, you've seen most of the presentation already. Good morning, everybody. Anybody here for Yankee Dental? We're not talking about crowns, implants, dentures. So if you are, you probably want to go to the other room. I wish, I'm sure it's fascinating stuff, like root canals. Well, not really, but I do not know anything about those. I've had a couple of wisdom teeth out. I can tell you about the user experience. It's not great. So yes, my name is Andrew Phillips. Those of you who've seen me walking around will probably have seen me. I really should actually be suing this company with these stickers because I got a free waxing. It doesn't say do not stick on your forehead because you will lose all your hair. But anyway, so don't try it. Thanks, Rich, for the introduction. I'm actually not going to talk about Deploy or any of our other products. This is not a product presentation. Of course, I'm more than welcome for you to come up and talk to me or any one of the team here at any time about these products. What I want to talk about touches on quite a lot of what Rich was alluding to, basically about three different components that are really interesting and important and that we've seen in different stages of the maturity and evolution of how companies go through implementing continuous delivery, or for that matter, one of a number of other initiatives. So a lot of this stuff is kind of transferable. So yes, I'm from those guys. KK, obviously, you know where he is, and Rich is from Black Diamond. So that's the logo you want to look out for if you want to find me. A little bit about me. Well, I'm the VP of Products for ZB Labs. I'm a developer by background. I've done a whole bunch of enterprise software development. When I'm not making PowerPoint slides or other kind of things as I do a lot today, I spend too many of my evening hours, at least according to my girlfriend, contributing to a bunch of open source projects. So if any of you know JClouds or of course Scala, Akka, those kind of things, I commit to those as well. Yeah, and that leaves a few hours for sleep in general. Although it might not be clear from my accent, I did actually grow up in the UK. So you will see British English spelling throughout this presentation. Don't be surprised, just like that. A little bit about ZB Labs, obviously kind of obligatory slide. We are a provider of delivery automation software. What does that mean? Well, pretty much anything that tooling can feasibly help with, and that's not everything, in the delivery automation process, we have great tools to help with that, and I think I can talk about those forever. Much more interesting, and you'll hear a little bit about that later, is what our customers say about us. Feel free to, again, we have a lot of the team here. They're usually sitting at the back. I don't know where they're hiding, but feel free to speak to any one of us about that. I notice a lot of people sitting at the back, by the way. When I was sitting back there just a second ago, it's really hard to see the slides from all the way back there. If you can, that's great, but there are a few open spaces at the front, and feel free just to bring your chairs, and the aisle is pretty wide. I'm sure there's some fire safety reasons for that, but don't be shy. Even halfway through the presentation, I'll try not to get too distracted. Just move forward if you want to see things a little better. I hope you can hear me, by the way, but I guess the mic is loud enough. Okay, this is quite we have quite a bit to go here. This is the agenda for what I'd like to discuss today. I'll do a very, very brief continuous delivery recap. I saw from the hands raised a second ago that there's not too much I think we need to discuss there. And I want to talk a bit about tooling, practices, culture, and how they relate, how we can bootstrap something like a CD culture, and then how we can make sure that it basically stays kind of permanent or not transient at any rate in our organization. Saw a lot of hands out there earlier. I'll just repeat the question a little bit. Lots of people were doing continuous delivery. That's great. How many people are doing continuous delivery to production? Oh, either the arms are all tired right now, or that number is somewhat smaller. Okay, then so that an interesting. So continuous delivery to the QA environment, testing. Okay, so that right gives a kind of good flavor of where we are. All right. Brief recap. Continuous delivery. Of course, as with any of these terms, there's a whole bunch of different definitions. The one that's on Wikipedia and that you'll find commonly used, it's a set of patterns and practices or best practices that can help your software teams basically get stuff out faster and make it better, and hopefully both of those together. Notice here it doesn't say is a particular product or tool set or whatever. So there's a few things here. Fundamentally, and I think Rich alluded to this quite well, it's not just a set of processes and practices, it's also a mindset really, a kind of philosophy to some extent. But this is, I guess, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today. So why? Good question. Very good question with any kind of initiative right now, because there is a tendency to think that DevOps is the goal. DevOps is a great means to achieving a lot of useful things, but it's not a business goal as such. So let's bear in mind what the goal is. Why are people doing continuous delivery? Well, there's a lot of competitive pressure right now. It's not something that one or two companies who are crazy are doing. There's a lot of companies out there and big established companies that are trying to move towards this. I remember a discussion we were having with the CIO of a I think top 10 global bank, who basically said, if we don't figure out a way to release stuff to market faster, we will go down the tubes. It's a pretty big statement to make for a top 10 bank. So it's a hot trend, of course, that certainly for the practitioners, that's I think a justified, strong motivating factor. There's a lot of interest in this area. It's something people feel they should be trying out. It's something people feel they should get to grips with. And I think that drives, of course, a lot of the adoption of some of this tooling. And I think there are concrete business values here. It can make stuff get out to market faster if you get it right. It can also actually give you a better handle on application quality, better insight into that. And of course, as Rich was also saying, one of the fundamental goals here, it's not just to get stuff out faster, but to know more about what that stuff is doing. In other words, close the feedback cycle and help you make better decisions about building better software in the first place. If that CIO quote sounded a bit like fear-mongering, well, it's a tough world out there. So this is not just something that you should consider as fun. There are quite a lot of people saying it's something you really should be looking at also as a business necessity as well. A couple of quick asides. I'm known for asides, so I'll try to minimize them here. Who here does Agile? Agile? Oh, a lot. Oh, shouldn't even bother to ask. Then I guess, does anybody recognize what this is? This statement. A few people know. Yes, if you got that right, ching, 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 you win. This is principle number 1. Not 4, number 1 from the Agile Manifesto. Notice what it says. Continuous delivery to the customer of valuable software. So from a highly theoretical ivory tower perspective, one might even say that if you're not doing this, you're not doing Agile. Of course, that's very ivory tower and theoretical, but it's worth bearing in mind. Agile is not just putting up a board with 5 lines on it and moving stickies about every week. That's great. But it's really about getting stuff to the customer. And I think Rich made a very good point. Potentially shippable software, fine. But do you actually go and ship it? What's the value of code in your repos? Another quick aside here about continuous delivery and DevOps and the relationship between the two, potentially. There's a whole ton of messaging in this space right now. Everybody's piling onto the bandwagon. We've had great instances of big corporations. Overnight, everybody who used to be an ITIL expert on their LinkedIn profile was a DevOps expert, that kind of stuff. So if you're coming into this space right now, whoops, just destroyed the recording. I fully sympathize that you could be confused with what's going on here. And there's no contradiction, I might say, into some sense, that I obviously work for a tool vendor as well. I think it's truthfully and honestly said that we've been with the DevOps game for a long time now. We've known Patrick Dubois from pretty much after the time he put his famous sticky agile in operations on that famous conference. We've been in some of the early DevOps days talking, so we know this game pretty well. I think one of the key points, and I've just reiterating what I've already said, whatever you call these initiatives, that's great, but the really important thing is that you know why you're doing them. You know, you're really trying to do this to deliver some tangible business value, or at least some value to your teams. And we can talk about the definitions, you know, over lunch, over coffee. More than happy to do that. All right. Well, I'm doing pretty well. Maybe that's because I'm talking so fast. So let me slow down a little bit. Now, I know the title of the talk is The Three Pillars, but that would be a little arrogant to some extent. There are many more aspects that are important here. So let's make it 3 pillars. 3 important things about continuous delivery. Culture. What's culture? Oh God, we could have a whole discussion just about that. But for the perspective of this talk, it's a kind of set of values, beliefs, traditions, principles, whatever, that you hold. Practices are behaviors and actions, things you actually do on a regular basis that derive from these values. And the tooling is, I guess, what we use to actually implement these behaviors and actions. So in terms of the kind of classic causal chain here, it would go something like this. We have culture, which is expressed through practices, and they're carried out using tooling. Super generic statement, obviously, so let's apply it to marshmallow roasting, right? Culture in this instance is the whole campfire thing. You know, people like to go camping. They love the atmosphere. It's a social, shared thing. It's a wonderful outdoors experience. Now, one of the things you do when you go camping is, at least in the US, for me it was a bit of a new thing as a European, you roast marshmallows over the campfire, and then, of course, there's tooling that makes that happen. This is the real roaster, R-E-E, lovely Google what they can find for you. We have a couple going cheap, no, just joking. So, 3 pillars, culture, practices, tooling, relationship applies to many, many different things. A few points about culture. Once practices or attitudes have reached a cultural level, they're extremely resilient to things going wrong. I don't think anybody believes that we would stop roasting marshmallows if the real roaster broke. We'd fix it. We'd go MacGyver stuff. We'd cut a tree off we'd cut a branch, not a tree. We'd cut a branch off a tree, and we'd use that. In fact, a lot of people do that anyway. So once you have the internal motivation to carry out a practice and make it work, then you will get around a lot of problems. You will want to overcome the hurdles. So getting back to our question of what we said earlier, who does CD? Who thinks they have a CD culture? So what I mean by this, well, let's take it one step back at the practice level. In which of your organizations, when the delivery tooling, not your production application, but your delivery tooling breaks, is this a code red emergency, all hands on deck? And maybe a step further than that, not just is it an emergency, it's just a defined response. In how many of your teams do you really just feel bad when your orchestrator is broken or when your build is broken? Bad to the point that you don't go home, you make time after dinner, you log in from your VPN, you go and work until you fix it. That's culture. That's when you really have the internal oh my goodness. You have the internal motivation to go fix stuff. And I think it's this kind of resilience that if we want to do this stuff right, that we need to achieve. Of course, there's always a flip side to this, no free lunch even at the culture level. That also, there's a risk of groupthink here. Once everybody believes that you should be doing something and there's a strong motivation to do that, it sometimes makes it difficult to think outside the box. So open mind or maintaining an open mind is important here, but there's way too long of a discussion to go into here. So please, if you're interested in that, then come and see me a little bit later. Problem. Culture is really hard to impose from the top down. Ask the Soviet Union. Ask anyone. People resist an imposition of a culture. And we've seen this with Rich or any of the guys from Black Diamond can tell you lovely stories about what happens when you try to impose Agile as a culture on an organization, or ITIL for that matter. It's really difficult. And of course, there's been a huge amount of research done on this topic. You know, this is not an IT thing. This is a cultural, social, anthropological thing. So, don't have time to go into all that now. But culture is hard to impose top-down. And judging by the hands, at least 50% of you, you know, this is not something that is part of your culture right now. A lot of organizations are starting out on the CD journey. So for them, it's not a question of, you know, having a culture and maintaining it. It's about how, first of all, does it make sense? But I certainly think it does. How can we go about achieving this? How can we go about building a continuous delivery culture? So let's talk about bootstrapping a continuous delivery culture. Wow, at this pace, I'm really going to be actually done much quicker than I thought. Let's look at those pillars a different way. Now, I know there's a lot of smart tech people here. Pillars are pretty symmetrical. It's kind of hard to look at them in a different way, so we'll turn them upside down. And to some extent, you can think of this as an alternative title for this talk, right? Bootstrapping a CD culture is really what I'd like to focus here quite strongly. So we started out with this kind of picture. Culture expressed through practices carried out using tooling. Let's change it up a little bit. Let's think about tooling, which enables practices whose effects give rise to culture. And wonderfully, I don't know, nitpicking argument so far, I understand the comment, but the key point of what I'm doing here, I'm trying to think about inverting the causal relationships here. What gives rise to what? Why start with tooling and practices? Well, because it's just a lot easier to some extent. The tooling, you know, if you've downloaded Jenkins or if you have it running, you know what that experience is, or deployed, or any of the other tools for that matter. It's not trivial. There's still work involved in getting tooling up and running and gluing the pieces together to make some kind of practice happen. But it's a known problem to a large extent. So, you know, certainly compared to culture, which is an unknown problem, imposing a culture is a problem that nobody has solved so far. Tooling is reasonably easy to get down, to get up and running. It's quote-unquote just time. Now, I know time is not free, but if you're motivated to try this, either through my shark picture earlier or because you really believe that this is a good thing to do, then you will find that time and you will make this happen. It's low risk. The tools are largely free, or they're very, very cheap. You can put them on a credit card and smuggle it into the, you know, the cookies budget or whatever. And they're pretty skunk worksable too. What I mean by that, you can kind of fly them in under the radar. You typically don't need to go to the CIO, present a business case, get all kinds of approvals. Sure, if you want to do deployment to production, you're going to have to speak to some people. But you can build stuff here. You can bootstrap a couple of, you know, code review, continuous integration, get some rollout going with your deployment tooling. You can see the results, so you can start to build something from the bottom up here. And then that gives you demonstrable effects. You can actually go and show someone, look, this is what we've done. This is what it allows us to do. You know, we took some baselines. We now have this result. Does this look like a good idea? Don't you think this is something we should be doing at a little bit of a broader level? So it's a great way of getting after some of that low-hanging fruit. The delivery automation space is still surprisingly full of, you know, manual, inefficient people writing spreadsheets or Word documents and sending them over to somebody else to have them do something. Yeah, that's not a super efficient way of doing stuff if we want to deliver maybe once a day or whatever our goal happens to be. So this is certainly a good way of getting started. Tell a quick story. So Acme Inc. has gone, and you know they've done this. They've started bootstrapping their CD culture. They've downloaded Jenkins, hooked it up to, you know, Mansion. KK is going to talk about lots of cool stuff that they have. And they've got some continuous delivery tooling, some deployment automation stuff. Of course, they use deployed because it's the only thing you can use. Blah, 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 blah. And they've hooked it up and they've done some, you know, pipelines, great. Or actually, they didn't do it themselves. They got some consultants in because they wanted it quickly. They were able to do it reasonably cheaply. And it ran fine for a while. It's sitting there churning away, and the builds are all green, deployment's going well. The consultants leave, you know, they've done their job, they move on, or if it's somebody in your own organization, they move to a different department, they leave, whatever. And then stuff starts to go a little bit wrong. something breaks, the environment gets corrupted, the builds start taking too long, they start timing out, you start having heap overflows, file open, whatever. And yeah, does anybody have time or know exactly how to fix it? Blah, not quite sure. Well, we'll just disable this part of the build or we'll skip it. And then you have the broken Windows syndrome very, very quickly. Very soon you just have this thing that used to be useful once. Now it really doesn't work, or it works half, so we're going to ignore it and just move past it. You can kind of see where this goes in the end. Similar story. So this is what I mean by quick win chasm. Yes, it's great to use tooling and set up some basic practices to get some quick wins, to pick some of that low-hanging fruit. But tooling by itself only goes so far. And this is not necessarily just a fact of the tooling breaking, as I said in my previous example. It's also a fact of the tooling becoming unfit for purpose. As your organization changes, as you start doing, say, mobile, or whatever the next flavor of the month application framework happens to be, you have to be able to make your tooling work for you in this domain as well. So even if you have like the most reliable tooling in the world, if you don't have the ability to make it grow and evolve with what you're doing in your organization, it will have your broken Windows syndrome, or I don't know, ignored Windows syndrome, empty, whatever. So resilience, keeping these practices, moving from that quick win. This is what I mean by quick win chasm, right? It's pretty easy to get to the quick win, but actually moving, going from there to something that is really embedded in your organization, becomes part of your DNA, is a whole different kettle of fish. And it's not easy. As I said, culture is an unsolved problem to that extent. But this is what we really need to do if we want to make these processes resilient and kind of embedded. So yeah, be wary of this idea that, well, we've done something, we've achieved benefits, we're now able to do something quick, well, now we can stop. We need to go one further step. So let me try to put down 5 key points here that certainly in my experience doing this in a whole bunch of organizations are useful. They're not the only ones. It's not like not the necessary and sufficient set here, but 5 important things that I found have certainly helped a lot to get over the quick win chasm here. First one, obvious, get management buy-in. I said you can fly in the tooling and the initial practices under the radar, and that's true. But moving to the point where you really want to embed this in the DNA, you can't keep doing that secretly. There's no magic stuff you can put in the coffee that suddenly makes everybody wake up in the morning and say, oh, this is what we should do. So you need some, some visible supporters for this, maybe to win over some critics. So go with results, go with good things you've done, and make sure the management feels that this is a good thing and is behind it. Get people who've been there. It's hard to explain to your, if you've never been at a campfire, if you've never enjoyed the atmosphere and tasted a roasted marshmallow and had it all over your clothes and not worried about it, it's hard to enthuse people about this if you can't tell the story genuinely yourself. People have a very fine sense for somebody who's just reading off a script. We've evolved over millions of years to have a good sensibility for that. If you don't have this kind of someone in your organization who's been there and who knows what it's like, yeah, go get them. Go hire someone, go send someone off to do it, go get a consultant if necessary. Listen to someone, speak about it passionately, be motivated by the fact that they've actually done it. Because they can tell you not only what it's like, they can give you a feel for what it should feel like. And this goes to creating champions. This is something more of a manager bullet point, put it that way. A lot of you here are those champions, so I can't tell you to create yourselves. But it's not just for managers. Also make sure somebody in your team is a champion. Not everybody loves setting up, dare I say it, not everybody loves setting up and maintaining Jenkins. Some people on your teams might prefer to write the code or look at the static analysis or whatever. Make sure there is somebody on your team who loves it, who's passionate about it, who wants to make it work in the middle of the night, and help them get the support and the time they need to do this. This is not something that they should have to do in their spare time, instead of taking their kids to soccer practice or whatever. If your boss or your development manager or whoever your manager is doesn't say, well, we shouldn't be spending time on this, go fight for it. It's important. And make things visible. This relates to all the other ones. You can't get management buy-in if you can't show them what you're doing. It's a fun story from Netflix. It's not really related to delivery tooling, but about making things visible. It's really important when you put powerful things in place. They wanted to make their system more resilient, and they had bad outages, ripple failures, things falling over, nobody could get videos, it was very bad. So they spent a lot of engineering time, some of their top engineers worked on this great system of like back-offs, and it's smart, it's a loosely decoupled or loosely coupled system. If one thing fell over, the rest would recognize the state, would back off, they'd throttle their requests, everything would slow down, slowly things would come up again. They worked like crazy, they rolled it out, outage happened, something went down, systems backed off, beautiful, everything did what they should. But the people who were in the operations, the NOC at the time, well, they didn't know that this was what was going to happen. Nobody told them. The system wasn't telling them, I am now going to back off. There's no visibility, it was this black box. What did they do? After 5 minutes or 10, so they thought they found the problem. It was some machine with some corrupt, I don't know, chef recipe or whatever. They fixed it, they rolled it back, they thought, okay, we've solved the problem. 10 minutes later, everything's still slow. That's what the system was designed to do. It was perfect, but they didn't know. What did they do? Panicked. They started rebooting systems left, right, and center. They made the outage 10 times worse, simply because they didn't know what the system was doing. Okay, it's a bit of an aside. Whoops. But the reason I told that story is because it's critical, if you put delivery automation in place, that people can see what it's doing. And this is not about making a nice massage report for the manager in which you ignore all the failures. You have to be open about this stuff. Show the pipeline while it's running. Show the things that break. Show the things that you're fixing. Make it clear that you're working on this. That gives people the confidence that they can understand what's going on and relate to it. Yeah, and communicate. That's how you get buy-in. Tell the story. Show people what's going on. It's not a secret thing you need to be doing in a corner and then magically spring it on as a surprise like unwrap a present. No, you get buy-in by doing this kind of stuff. Culture by stealth doesn't work. Okay, so much for the theoretical part of the talk, right? Pretty much everything I said so far could largely be applied to a whole number of domains, hopefully successfully. Let's switch gears a little bit now, and let's talk about some specific practical examples of tooling, practices, and culture as it applies to continuous delivery. Things I've done, things we've done at companies, other companies have done that really work well. Start with code review. Code review tooling specifically. Of course, as we will see with all these points, there is a close relationship between tooling, practices, and to some extent culture. I was at an interesting meetup at Guild recently down in New York, where they were saying and talking about some of their growing pains as an organization, and they were saying code review was one of the most essential things, and good code review tooling, they were using Gerrit, but you can use GitHub or whatever rocks your boat. One of the most essential things that they were doing in their organization for two reasons. First of all, it helped maintain quality at a level that was hard to check with automated tools. Automated tools will do a whole bunch of stuff for you, but the kind of intuitive feel that an expert developer, this looks wrong, it's weird, why are we doing it this way? It's very hard to capture that with tooling. And the other thing was massively increased the understanding of what was going on in the systems overall. So not just finding problems, but also making sure people know what's going on. So get code review tooling if you don't have it. Very useful. Well, I'm not going to talk much about this. KK will do a much better job at that than I will, and I'm really looking forward to what he has to say. Maybe he can talk about Japanese suites as well. I guess if we ask him nicely, he can write like a Japanese suite plugin for Jenkins until the talk comes up. No, very important. Rich mentioned it. Make sure your code is shippable. There's a lot of interesting things in Jenkins that will help with some of the other stuff like promoted builds, code review tooling, and so on. Deployment. We can have a long discussion about what kind of tooling you need, what's best for your situation. There's a whole bunch of things in this space, from the script that you wrote. You can do it with Jenkins, you can do it with the provisioning tools. We see a lot of, thankfully, customers who are perfect for a dedicated tool that addresses some of the specific challenges in the deployment space, so come see me for details about this. But you definitely need to address this topic somehow. no matter which way you do it. Testing and quality. In continuous delivery, we had an interesting webinar recently with David Farley, one of the guys who wrote the book. I'm not going to call it the doorstopper. No, it's a great book, but it's pretty big. And yeah, certainly go onto our site, download it or see one of the summaries of it. Interesting stuff. It's basically saying what they were doing at LMAX. Testing and quality is one of the most important things in the continuous delivery pipeline. The rest, quote unquote, is just plumbing. Why do you have a pipeline in the first place? You don't have a pipeline because it can continuously integrate code. You have a pipeline so that you can get stuff out there and be confident that it will meet or fulfill the purpose that your code was written for. You can have all the other tooling in place, but if you say, oh, well, we'll do the testing later, then you're not really going to get a whole bunch of benefit out of this. The other problem is testing is hard. It's one of those tricky things. So we'll talk a little bit about that in culture and practices as well. One of the reasons why I split testing and quality here, testing, of course, there's a gazillion different types of tests. I think they had an interesting session at a recent SITConf. If you haven't been to SITConf, by the way, a very interesting conference. It's kind of like DevOps Days, but for CI. Where they try to come up with different types of tooling. And I think they ended up with 40 or some stupid number. Quality goes beyond testing, certainly in a continuous delivery pipeline, because it encompasses what your customers are actually doing with the application once it's live. So there's an element of monitoring that going on in here at the system level, at the business logic level, kind of what you get from an APM tool. And then there's a whole other user experience level. There's some interesting companies trying to do things like monitor Twitter streams, or if you write a mobile app, that's an especially important way to gauge customer feedback, is to look at what they say about it on the App Store review page, what they tweet, and so on. And this is part of the feedback that you really want to integrate into your continuous delivery cycle. Provisioning, yeah, really important. Talking about foundations, perhaps one of the most critical pieces of foundations. When you do continuous delivery, you're going to run a whole bunch of tests. You're going to run bunches of tests, and you're not going to want to be bottlenecked by the fact that you only have 2 testing environments with 20 projects trying to run them. That's just not going to work. Or at least it's not going to work for most of the business goals that your organizations have. If you only want to release once every 3 months, fine. So provisioning is very important. It's also one of the biggest causes of failure of deployments and pipelines in general is misconfigured, corrupt, whatever, testing environments. So get this right, get tooling in place to do this. Again, we can talk at long length about the challenges of doing this with like a system provisioning tool like Puppet or Chef or whatever, how you scale that up to an environment level. But we're not having a long tooling talk here. Interesting stuff what they're doing at Guild, by the way. They're using a lot of Docker here, and they're making interesting mixes of like shared environments to some extent. They have 400 to 255 services or something. Obviously, you can't run even Docker 255 containers on your machine is a bit heavy. So they have an interesting kind of overlay principle where they have a couple of shared environments in the cloud, but you can override individual services with local containers, and they magically wire them up to make it work. Again, interesting ideas. Orchestration. It's great to have all these individual pieces, but somewhere you need to figure out what the pipeline is supposed to do. Which steps come after which other steps, under what conditions, how can I visualize what's going on, and so on and so forth. So you need some puppet master, well, shouldn't use that, it's a brand name, some controller at the top level that does this. And again, which type of tooling specifically, or which type of tool makes sense here, whether you want a dedicated one, whether you're happy to do this with a CI tool, depends a bit on your scenario, but you certainly need something at the top level here. And if you think about the things we were saying, making things visible, this is not just about its capability to orchestrate technically, but also to show what's going on. Oh, monitoring, yeah. So this comes back to what I was saying, that quality goes beyond just what happens to the point where you go live. Quality, an essential component, perhaps the essential component of quality, is what happens once it's live. And you have to, getting the kind of data that you can out of your environments is really important here. From anything from OS level kind of stats up to business APM style stuff. Can I track my checkout process, my add to shopping cart, whatever your business logic is, and then up to your quality or user experience level. All right, whew, let's have a look. Okay, we'll do pretty well here. Practices. Keep changes small. If you're doing Agile, then of course you've heard this a million times already. It's just hard to make continuous delivery work if every time you want to release, you have to spend 2.5 hours compiling a 4 GB ear file or whatever. I've seen all this stuff. Yeah, download the internet, put it in an ear file. Done. Keep changes small, very important. Avoid the one of the reasons why people make big bang releases is because there's a sort of fixed amount of overhead of getting that stuff live. And nobody wants to go through the whole pain of a CAB review and formal change control process if you only want to move a button from one side to the other. So then there's a natural tendency to pile a lot of stuff into that because you've got to have the fixed overhead anyway. CD tries to change that. Because it becomes easy to release small changes, also think in terms of making small changes. This starts with the level of individual commits. Don't put 10 features in a single commit. Make commits small. Make changes to your system small. Why? Because it creates more independent variables in your experiments. Basically, if you change 100 things in the system at the same time, anybody who's tried to do any kind of precision anything, whether it's precision parking or whatever, knows if you're a pilot, landing, if you get it wrong the first time, change one variable. Figure out how it affects the process and then try again. If you changed 100 different features in your application and then your customers react badly, how on earth are you going to know which was the one that really annoyed them the most? If you make small changes, then you have independent variables largely, and you can figure out which of the changes were good and which of the ones were not so good. Sure. Make a build? Yeah, okay. The different strategies there depends on how complicated and expensive a build is. But definitely a good question. So let's get back to that one. Keeping changes small isn't free, of course, unfortunately. Sometimes it requires architectural changes to the way your apps are written. Not every app allows for this to happen. The 4 GB ear file makes this hard, for instance. Keeping changes small is also related to things like feature flags, in the sense that gives you an explicit way of making small changes to your application. If you, instead of moving the button from left to right, you could have a variable that specifies how far over the page the button goes, and then you could, 25% of your target production environment moves the button a different amount. That's a nice way of doing multivariate testing to figure out which movement is the right movement. But again, it requires thinking about your apps in a different way. Quality before functionality. What do I mean by this? I mean, if a new feature is written, don't be tempted to rush it live if it degrades the whatever quality metric is important for your system. The beauty, the usability, the resilience, the availability, whatever, just because the functionality is ready. No, it's not ready. Making sure it's of course a difficult statement to keep your quality bar high, but that allows you to ultimately, if you have a stable base in that sense, that allows you to make the quick changes, and it gives you the confidence that you can make it, and if it doesn't work well, you back it out. So you have to believe that quality is important here. This is, of course, also a cultural thing. Note that I'm not defining what quality is. Quality means a different thing for every organization, composed of many different variables, but you have to agree on it. You have to have some shared definition, and make sure that is regarded as more important than just getting the next feature out there. Putting tests up front. To some extent, this is TDD. There's a related, of course, also to quality before functionality. Make sure you have a way of verifying that your code, that the change you're making actually does what you want it to do. So start out with a test. A test, an automated test, is also a great way of producing an understandable, hopefully, shared artifact with your business, together with the business, that will allow you to verify whether you're doing the right thing. That serves as your template for this is what we're actually trying to build. Don't write the code and then backfill the test later so you get 100% test coverage. Get everyone involved early. This is a very DevOpsy type message. Everybody has to be should be on the same page here. There is nothing like a game of telephone or Chinese whispers if you're British for making sure that the code that you deliver is nothing like what the business wants in the first place. So have that meeting at the beginning. Have someone from the business in there to explain what they want. If this is the meeting where you come up with that automated test, then you should hopefully be able to agree on the fact that this is really what is required. And you don't have these translation problems where somebody tries to take a document or a Jira ticket or a Confluence page or whatever, convert that into some complicated automated testing language, and then run it on some tool that doesn't really tell you what's happening, and then you end up with code that isn't really what you want. No more code than necessary. This is also, I mean, once you have a test, this is kind of a corollary of put the test up front to some extent. Once you have a test that defines what you want the application to do and at what specific level of quality, you don't have to write more code beyond the point where this thing has gone green. So validate this often, and then you really should have the idea that, okay, well, we've done what we've agreed to do. Now let's try this experiment and see if it really works. And then if it needs to be better in some way, of course, let's do that. But let's not like try to second guess what's going to happen and oh, we need to refactor the whole thing because probably maybe on a Thursday with this particular peak and load, it's going to all go crazy. I'm not trying to get rid of red-green refactor here, by the way. There is still, of course, you have to use common sense and say, yeah, no, this is just because this is a horrible hacked way of getting it in. But really, I know this myself as a developer. Especially if you don't have a clear definition of whether it's finished or not in the form of a test, there's a very great tendency, like I do in my talks sometimes, to get into rabbit holes and go much further than is actually required to meet the demand of this particular feature. Ongoing user dialogue. So this is again about second guessing. So one of the things that happens in Big Bang releases a lot. The way they're planned is that, yeah, well, maybe marketing does some kind of user, I don't know, they have a forum, or they do some, they look at the market, they send out some questionnaires, whatever. Basically, people get into a room and they try to second guess what the users might want. You come up with this long list of what you think your users would like, and then you get people to build it, and then you hope it goes right. One of the nice things that keeping changes small allows you to do is to move from the point where you have this kind of guess, verify cycle, which to some extent is again, notice what Rich was saying earlier, the wall between dev and ops. Well, the guess, verify cycle is a bit like having the wall between us and our customers. You used to throw stuff over the wall, you see what they say, you try to do better next time. If we can make small changes, we can actually move into a dialogue with our customers. There's some lovely use cases where somebody moves a button from left to right, for instance, and then a customer tweets, "Oh, company X has moved the button from left to right. I can't find it anymore. It sucks." You can see this if you have your quality monitoring set up, and 10 minutes after that tweet went out, you can have moved it back. And this means, fundamentally, this kind of speed means that we can move from a model where we try to guess what the business tries to guess what the customers want, and we just implement it. We can move to a model where our application delivery process is a bit like a dialogue, a bit like a discussion between us and our customers, our users. And this is a great, much more responsive way of delivering features than throwing stuff over the wall. One important point here is, if it comes across as though I'm saying you should only do things because users ask for them, well, no, that's not quite true. Of course, the team also has a stake in this. Your architects or your developers have a legitimate right to say, well, wait a minute, if we refactor this in this piece, or if we swap Solr with Elasticsearch or whatever, then the system will get better in this and this way. And that is a perfectly legitimate experiment to try. But it should be subject to the same constraints as everything else. It shouldn't be testable. It should have some kind of benefit that the business can agree to. And then you run it and you see what happens. Of course, it's not quite that easy to just swap out Elasticsearch for Solr, but it's not just about listening to your users, also about listening to your own team, of course. Delivery tooling is serious tooling. So what I mean by this is that you do what you would do for your production servers. You back them up. You make them highly available. You get redundancy, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. Especially if you do a Skunkworks project initially, you find the Pentium 386 or whatever that's in your kid's closet, and then you install Jenkins. It'll probably run fine on there. And that's great for the beginning, but that's not the way you can run a serious delivery tooling setup. Delivery automation is critical automation in a continuous delivery company, so it needs to be treated as such as well. Culture. Now, I can probably skip through these a little quicker because, as you will quickly see, there is a reasonably close correlation between practices and culture. But there are a few I would like to touch on specifically. One is that we can always do better. Continuous integration is never done to that extent. Whether at the moment your business needs to do better or whether you're just doing fine right now is a different question. But we don't want to have the complacent mentality, oh, it's perfect. We are the poster children of continuous delivery. If you look up continuous delivery in the dictionary, you see us. No, that's not the way it works. This is about the whole group thing. We have an open mind. There is always another bottleneck that we can improve. And we shouldn't get complacent. We need to have a mentality where we are aware of this and we identify, we know what we could do better if it became necessary to do so. And if you have leeway, then of course do that. You've never, and if your delivery pipeline does exactly what you want it to do, you can still always do better by building better applications, by making more, getting more revenue, having more users sign up. So then you can invest all your creative energy into figuring out ways to listen to your customers better, to get better data from your customers so that you can make better features for them. Again, another DevOpsy type message here. It's not, we are the guys implementing what they want for those people over there. It's our service. They're our features that we're implementing, and they're our users. Everybody involved in this pipeline, it's all part of the same team. We should have a shared understanding, and that should come right from the beginning because we've all been in the same room discussing what we're going to do. And then we all feel responsible for making it happen. This is as much something that the business needs to learn as well. Of course, this is not just a cultural change that needs to be adopted, say, within IT, but it's a very important mindset to have in a continuous delivery company. Yes, I know, again, for the developers out there, I know actually technically business includes us and not the other way around. But what I mean by this is that the us that we talk about when we say our service includes the people from the business. And that also means that it's a right and a responsibility at the same time. The only way this can really work is if they are prepared to dedicate full-time resources to the continuous delivery process. Now you can't, continuous delivery largely, somebody once put it as putting the business at the wheel. And that's true, but if you're at the wheel of a car, you can't just go into the back and go have a nap. You need to be prepared to sit there and to drive that thing. We're not at the automated car stage yet. Well, getting there maybe. So the business needs to realize that they need to invest serious time into doing this. Your product owner needs to be there. He needs to be looking at what your customers are saying, needs to be talking to people. So it's a real investment, and this is why the management buy-in is so important. But the scope of this team needs to go beyond just, okay, we have QA, a developer, and somebody from operations, we're done. So tools work for your team, not against your team, not next to your team. Tooling is for people. People are and will always remain an essential part of your overall delivery system. They're the most flexible, the most creative. They can do types of analyses that we really can't do with tools yet. That doesn't mean, of course, I work for a tooling vendor. Why am I saying this? Of course there is a place for tooling. It's totally not a contradictory statement. There are many parts of your delivery automation or your delivery system which are the kind of manual, repetitive, error-prone tasks that are perfect for automation. But the tooling needs to work with your users. They need to feel that it does work for them. It helps them focus on other things, do a better job, and it needs to talk to them. It needs to be controllable. There's a nice, interesting presentation from Dan Milstein out there great talk from Velocity about doing, well, it's actually about doing great postmortems. But he talks about research into automation versus tooling. Automation typically has the characteristics of a black box that is, it has there's highly technical terms. I think it's strong, silent. I've forgotten the other two. Look it up if you're interested. Basically, it's a magic box that you can't see, you can't control, and that does lots of scary stuff. A bit like the Netflix example. That's not what you want to build. You want to build or use tooling. Is open, is controllable where it needs to be. It's great at its job, but it's a member of the team. I don't know if anybody's seen the chat ops at Netflix. No, chat ops at GitHub. ASF does pretty much the same thing. They have a great model where they're very distributed in ops. And they sit in chat rooms all the time. And the tools are in the chat rooms too. Server 247 is a member of the chat room. And they can say in the chat room, server 247, give me your logs, barf, into IRC. Server 247, reboot yourself. Are you sure? Yes, go. Tools are part of your team. They're not magic stuff that runs alongside. But this is a very important mindset to have. And this is getting back to the example I was saying earlier. Nobody goes home if your delivery automation system is broken. You should feel bad when this happens. I've got to stop shaking. If you think, oh, well, bad luck, okay, we'll fix Jenkins like next week. It's just that flaky, whatever, fitness test again. No big deal. Production is still fine. No, your delivery automation is a critical system. If you want to get continuous delivery right, if this breaks, your entire ability to do experiments with your customers is out of order. People need to feel that they should be, logging in and fixing this. About feeling bad. All right, last couple of things. Getting started. All very nice to have some practical examples. But yeah, if you're starting out now, where do you go? What do you start? Get a baseline. Most important thing for any of these initiatives, especially if you then want to go to the point where you try to convince your management that you want to make this bigger, you need to know what you're doing right now. Value stream analysis is a nice technique from Lean to do this. Black Diamond could tell you all about that. But there are other ways to do it. And also make sure you have an open mind. The way we do things right now isn't the only way it's possible. Things can be done differently. And maybe we can do better if we do things differently. The delivery automation process, your release flow, is often a part of the company where people think, yeah, well, that's just the way it is. I know, it doesn't work very well. It's like the rain. What are you going to do? It's winter. It snows. It's just the way it is. No. It's possible to do things differently. There are companies out there, and increasingly those companies are your competitors, that's back to the shark, who are doing this differently. If you can release once every 6 months and your competitor can release once every 2 hours, that is going to hurt you badly. Define incremental goals. No ocean boiling, please. Make small changes. Figure out what's the first step that you can do to make things better. Ask yourself, no, we're not going to start an open-ended project of, say, 2 years or more to get this to work. If we had a month or even a week, what could we do to make things a little bit better? Think in terms of incremental goals. And as I said, start with tooling. It's of the three, it's the easy thing to do. So it's good low-hanging fruit. Okay. These are the ones that start to get a little more difficult, of course. Testing and quality. I've gone on and on about how that's very, very important, but it's also trickier to do because unless you've started out with test first and you have good tests for everything, this is basically a lot of backfilling often. And backfilling requires time and ultimately investment. So you need to get buy-in for this, and you will need to do the communicating and the work to convince people that this really is necessary. If you have an application architecture, and maybe this also gets back to the question we had here about would you build once or commit? If you have an architecture that makes it very hard to make small changes to the system, simply because it's a huge clunky thing that needs to be rolled out in a super complicated way, mainly manual, that you just can't do, maybe you have to think about how you can change your architecture to make this easier. Incrementally, don't forget. If you're in a greenfield situation, lucky you. But then think about this from the beginning. Think about how can we build feature flags into our application. How can we build the kind of feedback systems into our application so that we can actually see what the users are doing and figure out whether the change that we made actually made their experience better or worse? And go after that full-time business focus. As I said, CD puts the business, this is hard to do, of course, but CD is about putting the business at the wheel ultimately. Sometimes you really have to persuade them that they should be driving. They need to be sitting there. But it's worthwhile. There are plenty of business cases out there from companies in all industries. It's not just the eBays, the LinkedIns, the Etsys of this world. There are companies in the financial sectors. There are companies in retailing, manufacturing, whatever, that are doing this right now. Some of them don't necessarily talk about it, but go to meetups, find out what's going on. A business case can most definitely be made for this. All right, so if you want more information, that's our company site. Of course, you can come and see us at the front as well. We have a bunch of interesting resources, both here and online, guides, white papers, whatever, where we've tried to put some of what I've just talked about in a form that you can digest more slowly. If you're interested in some of the stuff I've said, yeah, come by and speak to me now. If you think of something tomorrow, send me an email. And don't forget to come by and get some swag. Of course, we need swag. When you are the great conclusion! And with that, yeah, go have some coffee, everybody. Thank you very much.